Howdy, this is Lemmy with RevZilla TV, here to talk to you today about Roland's Preload Adjuster for Harley. You should be checking out a Roland Preload Adjuster if you're trying to dial in the suspension on your bike just a little bit and get your sag set up correctly. Roland is cranking these out for 39 and 49 millimeter front ends, so that should cover those of you on Sporties, FXRs, Dynas, and a couple of wide glides. Installation on these is 2 out of 3 beards on our BSD, our beard scale of difficulty. You do have to get your bike up off the ground, and you do need a little bit of safety equipment to get these things onto your bike safely. Let's get into these and we'll talk about what they do and what they're for. So a preload adjuster is specifically for setting sag on a motorcycle. Sag is exactly how much the suspension compresses as the rider is on the motorcycle. Now, it's generally agreed, typically, you're looking for a front suspension sag of about 60%. You want the front end to compress about 60% of its total travel. What the preload adjusters do effectively is squish that spring down and allow you to get your preload. It preloads the spring and it compresses it for you so that you can get your front suspension in the sweet spot of its travel. Now, it's not always it's not a substitute for a stiffer spring. If you need a stiffer spring, you need a stiffer spring. However, these can help dial in or tighten up a mushy feeling front end. So for a low buck option, if you're looking to get your front end dialed in a little bit, but you're not wanting to totally blow it apart and redo everything with emulators or springs or such, this could be a good way to get a good feel out of your front end and beautify the top tree of your bike just a little bit. Now, with regard to installation, I had mentioned earlier this is a 2-bearder. The reason this is a 2-bearder is kind of for a few reasons. This job gets a little bit complex. Firstly, you're going to want to have the bike up in the air. While it's possible to do this job with a motorcycle on the ground, it's not particularly safe, and honestly, it's not that much fun. It makes it really difficult. So the need for a lift or a jack, some way to get the bike up in the air, is present, and that's going to bump the difficulty scale up a little bit. You're going to need some specialized tools. Speaking of getting the bike up in the air, again, because we're dealing with suspension components and we're actually removing the cap that holds the fork spring in place, that thing's under compression, it's under tension. So you want to make sure that you're being safe when you're installing this stuff. Proper eye protection, leather gloves are a must. In terms of protection too, you want to protect your motorcycle. Remember, there's oil and fluid and dirty grossness in there, and if that spring does happen to come out, it may damage something. So you do want to make sure too you have your bike protected. Fender blanket over the tank and any type of cushioning or padding if you're worried about your ability to contain that spring and keep it from jumping out at you. Again, you shouldn't be scared so much of this happening. Just be cognizant of it. Anybody can do suspension work. It's not very hard. You should be just fine with things. One of the other things I'm going to caution you about too is if you're looking at these puppies, there's a very narrow area here where you're supposed to get a wrench on here. Again, you want to be super careful when you're doing this in terms of finish. The finish on these is really beautiful, but it's also easily marred if you're going to take tools to them. So what I'd recommend is wrapping either your wrench or vice grips, whatever you wind up using, you want to wrap those up in some sort of a tape or rags to make sure you're not marring up this finish. They are beautifully made, they are beautifully finished, but it's also very easy to mar that finish. And it won't look that great if you have a big old gouge on the top of your triple trees. Just be cognizant of it when you're doing the installation. I think these are a really cool product. It allows you to kind of tighten up the front end of a Sporty or an FXR quickly, easily, and it's also going to bring a little bit of beauty to your top tree. I'm not the only guy who, though, has an opinion on these things. Click below, check out what some other riders have to say who are rocking these on their bikes already. If you've got a question that's gone unanswered, get a hold of us. See us at RevZilla.com, or you can always get a Gear Geek live on the phone, 877-792-9455. I'm Lemmy. I'm out of here.